If Jesus Christ was the incarnation of Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, why does the term B.C. before Christ and A.D. after death exist? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to Just K. We're talking about everything that is health. Right now we're talking about spiritual health. If you're a subscriber, thank you so much. I love you. I appreciate you coming back to join me. If you're new here, consider clicking on that subscribe and the notification bell so that you can join us in all of our talks. We've been talking about Jesus Christ and his incarnation. And so it's brought up a question. Well, if Jesus Christ is just an incarnation of man, how do we have the term before Christ and after Christ? And that's what we're talking about today. Before Rome was a place, there were black African people called the African Dynasty that lived in a place called Etruria. You also must remember that there were black Asiatics over on the Asia side. There were also very wealthy Carthaginians in northern Africa. In 753 BC, two brothers by the name of Romulus and Remus found a town that they called the Seven Hills of Rome. Greece at this time was being controlled by a man called King Philip I. The goal of King Philip was to attain the riches of the territories around him, while the Etruscan goal was to gain more territory itself, not necessarily the riches. By 509 BC, Rome was a full-on country. They had conquered the Etruscans, and the survivors were put into slavery in Rome. The power of the monarchy in Rome was formed, meaning two magistrates would be elected annually. They were magistrates of the patrician, which was a term used for people born as descendants of the original senators of the Seven Hills of Rome. Out of that group of patricians, the citizens would vote for two of them annually to run Rome. It's during this period of all of this fighting for territory and riches that the Punic Wars were ignited. The Punic War was a war that was ignited when the Greeks, King Philip, stepped into a Carthaginian dispute on the island in Carthaginian territory that we now know as Sicily. The Greeks eventually got the better hand of that war, and again, now they have enslaved all of the survivors. Let's move up to 450 BC. In 450 BC, the first Roman laws were inscribed on 12 bronze tablets, and it was inscribed, the laws were created to make the citizens of Rome feel like they had more rights than what they actually did. It was a way to establish rulership for the patricians while appeasing the lower classes. These laws included procedures for courts and trials, laws regarding debts, the rights of fathers over the rest of the family, legal inheritance and guardianship laws, acquisition and possession laws, land rights, laws regarding injury called torts and delicts, public law, and sacred law. We'll talk about this later in the video, but of note, sacred law means in whatever you worship, worshiping the emperor too. By 336 BC, King Philip was murdered, and his father, Alexander, we now know as Alexander the Great, takes over, wanting to finish off what his father was doing, attaining as much riches as he could. Philip I was assassinated by his bodyguard at his daughter's wedding. Alexander I went on to conquer huge chunks of Egypt and Western Asia, but he died 13 years later. When he died, his guardsmen divided his conquered territories to themselves, creating three notable dynasties: the Seleucids of Syria, the Ptolemies of Egypt, and the Antigones of Greece and Macedonia. These dynasties weren't politically connected, but they did have one thing in common: the sacred law of everything Greek. You worship Greek, you speak Greek, everything Greek. Now, though, instead of the citizens voting for a patrician annually, it's under a king, an absolute rulership of one king, with the goal of showing their riches and their wealth. And as they're putting up statues and buildings for the patricians, regular citizens or people not so into that lifestyle started having issues and felt abandoned or unheard. And so they would start investing or diving into philosopher ideologies or mysterious laws of the time. This is what we're talking about, is considered the Hellenistic period. Hellenistic just really basically means everything that is Greek, or identifying to anything that is Greek. Some of these philosophers were people like Diogenes the Cynic. Diogenes the Cynic did not like the flaunting of all of this wealth, did not like the government. He protested against the government, calling it commercialism, making quotes such as, the government was just a peep show for fools. At that time, Rome was actually pretty tolerant of any polytheistic religion. That's important. Any religion that worshiped many gods, as long as that worship included, remember what I just said, sacred law, worshiping the emperor. A bishop at that time, a bishop named John Mark, who has actually been credited for later on writing the book of Mark in the Bible, introduced a religion. This religion focused on worship of the pyramids, the sun, and knowledge of the afterlife. A philosopher named Epicurus, who argued that that was all crazy, that's not true, that the purpose of life is to have the pursuit of pleasure and happiness. And that's it. There was also a group of Stoics who contended that none of that stuff is true. Not the Cynic's thoughts, not Epicurus's thoughts, that every man had a divinity inside him that was brought out and harnessed by living a life of dignity that's good and noble. Essentially, just toting along, following the laws, and doing what you're told. All this divide adds a new layer to the territory of Rome, who has conquered all of these lands. Now you've got all of these different ideologies going on, causing internal conflict, which creates a conflict when you're creating. So as you go to conquer more lands, you bring in more cultures and more ideologies, which creates unrest in your own territory even more. What do? First, because the Romans had this polytheistic view of religion, to worship many gods as well as the emperor, the Jewish people worshipped one God. The Copts, or what we call now the Coptics, worshipped the sun, one deity. This posed a problem, and the problem wasn't so much the monotheism. The problem was the lack of inclusion to the sacred law of worshiping the emperor. So this gets many Copts and Jewish people persecuted in Rome. Let's bring us up to the time of Constantine. Enough time has passed, enough religious persecutions have happened. The best writings of the old philosophers, like the Cynic, have been put into a book which declares very passionately, sometimes very dramatically, the culture of life during the time that they were. Either what they felt about life, what they felt about the government, or what they felt about patricians during that time. This book was eventually called the Bible. Not yet the Old Testament, just the Bible. So what Constantine did was he took the Tanakh from the Jewish people. He took basic ideologies of reincarnation, etc., from the Coptics, and they took these various ideologies from the inner culture and tried to come up with a way to make something so absolute that you could not dispute its existence. The reason this was done is you can't continue conquering new territories if the territory you have is not under control. Because Constantine was born in a place at a time where he was taught under the monotheism religion. That's what he wanted to be baptized under. He chose that route to quell the problem that he saw brewing in Rome. I said in my video in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, what they did was they created Jesus, they made him the absolute law, they made the church establish that law, and they made it so that the conqueror, or the emperor, that the emperor upheld that law. Meaning you could die or you would be killed or persecuted if you did not follow that law. Why religion? It's deeper than just the fact that there were religious strife going on in the territory at that time. Like I said, Constantine, the emperor, was also a conqueror. And it's not just what was going on in his territory. It's a way to gain absolute rule as he takes over other territories. But why religion? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in our next video. And I can't wait to see you. Until then, remember to like, subscribe, help us this out, please. And click on that notification bell so we can keep talking and building our community of healthy, happy, prosperous, and woke conscious people together. Thank you.